Hi, my name's Anthony Caldwell, and some some people want me to make this so they know my full symptoms and everything leading up to what I eventually became diagnosed with as a brain tumor. And I don't know. Somehow, hopefully, this can help people going through what sort of similar situation, I guess. I don't know. Let's start. Last year, I had pretty bad headaches and migraines. I saw doctors about it, and they just thought they were regular headaches. So they just gave me medicine. And that carried on all at least half of last year. Start of this year, though, a new symptom started to kick in, and I started to get double vision. But I thought maybe I just needed glasses. Little did I know. Months down the line, it got worse and worse to the point where I couldn't focus on any object. I had to at least close one eye to read, and that sucked. And that was that. Another symptom that started to show up, also along with the double vision, it caused my balance to be off. Like, I could walk across the room fine, but if I were walking down a street, I couldn't walk in a straight line. Every now and then I would veer to the left or to the right and stumble a little, and that wasn't fun at all. I hated that. To a regular person that would see me walking down the street, they might think I was drunk, I don't know. And another symptom that started to show up eventually was tremors in my hands. At first it was just a minor shake like that, but as the months went on, it got worse to that, and I couldn't hold a cup. So if you saw me holding a cup, it was shaking like this, and everyone was concerned. And finally, the last symptom I got before I went and got a scan was a weird one. From time to time, my mouth would go numb. It would at first tingle, and I literally couldn't feel anything in my mouth. I could still use my tongue, but yeah, my mouth would go numb, and that was odd. And then eventually I went to the doctors and saw them. The doctor, being a doctor, suggested I go to an optometrist for my vision. I told him I couldn't afford it. So then he booked me in with an eye specialist that day. 2 hours later, I went and saw an eye specialist, and after he did all his tests, he was concerned because the reaction in one of my pupils was slower than the other. He shone a light to my left eye, and my left pupil dilated as normal, but when he did it in my right eye, it took a bit longer for my right eye to dilate. So he was a little concerned, and then he booked me in for a scan. 2 days later, I went and had an MRI, and that night I was rang by a neurosurgeon in Wellington telling me that I had a buildup of brain fluid which was causing all my symptoms, and he didn't tell me about my tumor. About an hour or so later, my dad picked me up crying, and I just thought it was because of the fluid. When he took me to basically his and my stepmother's place and dropped me off, he told me to sit down, and I was like, I just thought, it's fine. We'll get the fluid drained. It'll be alright. Then he told me that I had a tumor. My stepmother told me that the surgeon didn't want to tell me unless my dad told me first, or he told me in person, and I just broke down, because that's not news you want to hear at my age, 20. Yeah, and that freaked me out. Oh, and one thing I missed, which I which may happen throughout this video because my memory is bad, I basically had a continuous headache for months on end, probably starting from last year. Like, I would have a headache, sometimes it would be severe, sometimes it wouldn't. I would wake up with it, take medicine, it would go away, I would wake up, boom, there it is again. There was one day this year that I remember was the worst day I've ever had a headache. Basically, I couldn't lift my head up from this position because the pain at the back of my head prevented me from, if I did, the pain got worse. And so I thought, I'm gonna go lay down and have a sleep. I couldn't lay down at all. Every time I went to lay down, the pain worsened. And that's hell. Just sitting up like this, not being able to lay down or lift your head. It's not the best feeling in the world, and I would not wish that upon anyone. To carry on with the diagnosis thing. The very next day after I was diagnosed, I was flown down to Wellington Hospital so that they can have me there in case anything happened. I would be there at their service. They could look at me, they could treat me or whatever right away. 6 days later, I went to have my brain surgery, where, I don't know if you can see it, but there's the scar from that, where they created, in the base of my skull, they created a new passageway for the fluid to drain, so that, because my tumor essentially was blocking the flow of my brain fluid. So they created a new passageway so the fluid can drain down that way. While the tumor was still there, and they, when they did the surgery, they created the passageway, but they also did a biopsy, so they took a bit of the tumor so they can test it to find out what it is, if it's treatable, and all of all of that stuff. About a week, for 5 days, I basically had to lay in bed with a drain coming out of my head, just slowly draining out the brain fluid while the new passageway was getting kind of used to the flow of brain flow going through it, I guess, so it didn't swell up and close, and basically the surgery would have been for nothing. And those 5 days were absolutely horrible. I wasn't allowed to get out of bed, I wasn't allowed to sit up, I basically had to lay flat in a bed for 5 days straight, and you have no idea how I hated that. My back felt so bad. Around the second or third day, I was absolutely miserable because I couldn't really feed myself because I couldn't sit up to eat, basically, and all of that stuff. I hated it. I was so miserable. And about 5 days after my surgery, the drain was taken out, and that was that. About how long after that? About nearly. Wait, I was Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday. About 5 days after the drain came out, I was told the news of my tumor, and I was told that it was treatable and what it was called and all of that stuff, and I was incredibly relieved. I was so happy. And the day after that, I came home, obviously, and then about a few weeks after that, I went to Palmerston North to see the radiation oncologist and all of that stuff, and find out the detailed plan of my treatment and what I was going to be getting, how long the treatment was going to take. And they made a mold thingy of my face, so that every time I got my treatment, they would put that on. About 2 weeks after I went to Palmerston North, I started radiation therapy. During the first week, that was a tough time. I was basically in bed throughout. When I wasn't getting treatment, I was basically in bed. I could not eat because I just felt like throwing up, and I did. At one point, and during one day I threw up twice in an hour because that's how bad the nausea is when you're getting radiation therapy. It's different for everyone, but I was getting 2 doses of radiation, one in my head, one in my spine, and I hated that. Obviously, as time went on, it got better. My body started to get used to it. My taste buds still haven't fully returned. My appetite still hasn't fully returned, but the majority of it has. So yeah, there was that. A couple of weeks went along, and and then eventually my hair started to fall out. At first, it started to fall out like a cat was molting, but then 2 days after that, it started to fall out in clumps, and I honestly started to hate that because for nearly 20 years I've had a full head of hair, and I got really miserable and sad about it because my hair was falling out. I was warned about it, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to fall out, and I just felt so sad. I wanted to cry. I didn't, luckily. And then, a couple of days after that, I shaved it all off because might as well embrace it, and I did. So yeah, and radiation therapy went along, weeks went on, until November 2nd was my final radiation therapy. And the day before that, the radiation oncologist told me that in 2 months' time, which now would be in 6 weeks' time, I go for an MRI to find out the final results if the radiation worked, which here's the hoping. And then after that, every 6 months for the next 2 years, I go for an MRI to make sure that it stays away, because the radiation oncologist said that if it were to come back, it would be within the first 5 years. If it doesn't, then it's never coming back, which I'm hoping for. Because, oh come on, I've had, in 4 months, I've had a lot of shit happen medically, and I just don't want to go through this shit again. So yeah, that's all my symptoms. The process of everything I've had to go through since I was diagnosed in July. So basically, the basis of this video is, if you or anyone you know is going through this, there are people that will help you get through it. All you need is family and friends to help you through it. You can't get through it alone. Trust me. I didn't, and I thankfully had the support of all my friends and all my family to help me get through, and they honestly did make it easier for me. Because if I were going through this alone, I don't know if I would have actually been able to be honest. And I'm really thankful they did help me. So yeah, even if you don't have cancer, or my tumor is a cancer, a form of cancer. If you don't have cancer, or if you have like very bad social anxiety or depression or bipolar or things like that, whatever you do, do not give up. I know how cliche that sounds, but don't give up. You can get through this.